Chapter 1. For a man of his age, 52, divorced, he has, to his mind, solved the problem of sex rather well. On Thursday afternoons, he drives to Greenpoint. Punctually, at 2 p.m., he presses the buzzer at the entrance of Windsor Mansions, speaks his name, and enters. Waiting for him at the door of number 113 is Soraya. He goes straight through to the bedroom, which is pleasant smelling and softly lit, and undresses. Soraya emerges from the bathroom, drops her robe, slides into bed beside him. "Have you missed me?" she asks. "I miss you all the time," he replies. He strokes her honey-brown body, unmarked by the sun. He stretches her out, kisses her breasts. They make love. Soraya is tall and slim, with long black hair and dark liquid eyes. Technically, he is old enough to be her father, but then technically one can be a father at 12. He has been on her books for over a year. He finds her entirely satisfactory. In the desert of the week, Thursday has become an oasis of luxed volupty. In bed, Soraya is not effusive. Her temperament is in fact rather quiet and docile. In her general opinions, she is surprisingly moralistic. She is offended by tourists who bare their breasts on public beaches, others, she calls them. She thinks vagabonds should be rounded up and put to work sweeping the streets. How she reconciles her opinions with her line of business, he does not ask. Because he takes pleasure in her, because his pleasure is unfailing and affection has grown in him for her. To some degree, he believes this affection is reciprocated. Affection may not be love, but it is at least its cousin. Given their unpromising beginnings, they have been lucky, the two of them, he to have found her, she to have found him. His sentiments are, he is aware, complacent, even luxurious. Nevertheless, he does not cease to hold them. For a 90-minute session, he pays her 400 rand, of which half goes to discreet escorts. It seems a pity that discreet escorts should get so much, but they own number 113 and other flats in Windsor Mansions. In a sense, they own Soraya too. This part of her, this function. He has toyed with the idea of asking her to see him in her own time. He would like to spend an evening with her, perhaps even a whole night, but not the morning after. He knows too much about himself to subject her to a morning after, when he will be cold, surely impatient to be alone. That is his temperament. His temperament is not going to change. He is too old for that. His temperament is fixed, set. The skull followed by the temperament, the two hardest parts of the body. Follow your temperament. It is not a philosophy. He would not dignify it with that name. It is a rule, like the rule of Saint Benedict. He is in good health. His mind is clear. By profession, he is or has been a scholar, and scholarship still engages intermittently the core of him. He lives within his income, within his temperament, within his emotional means. Is he happy? By most measurements, yes, he believes he is. However, he has not forgotten the last chorus of Oedipus: call no man happy until he is dead. In the field of sex, his temperament, though intense, has never been passionate. Were he to choose a totem, it would be the snake. Intercourse between Soraya and himself would be, he imagines, rather like the copulation of snakes, lengthy, absurd, but rather abstract, rather dry, even at its hottest. Is Soraya's totem the snake too? No doubt with other men she becomes another woman, La Donna immobile, yet at the level of temperament her affinity with him can surely not be feigned. Though by occupation she is a loose woman, he trusts her within limits. During their sessions he speaks to her with a certain freedom. Even on occasions unburdens himself. She knows the facts of his life. She has heard the stories of his 2 marriages, knows about his daughter and his daughter's ups and downs. She knows many of his opinions. Of her life outside Windsor Mansions, Soraya reveals nothing. Soraya is not her real name, that is sure of. There are signs she has borne a child or children. It may be that she is not a professional at all. She may work for the agency only 1 or 2 afternoons a week, and for the rest live a respectable life in the suburbs of Rylands or Athlone. That would be unusual for a Muslim, but all things are possible these days. About his own job, he says little, not wanting to bore her. He earns his living at the Cape Technical University, formerly Cape Town University College. Once a professor of modern languages, he has been since classics and modern languages were closed down as a part of great rationalization. Adjunct professor of communications. Like all rationalized personnel, he is allowed to defer 1 special field course a year, irrespective of enrollment, because that is good for morale. This year, he is offering a course in the Romantic Poets. For the rest, he teaches Communication 101, Communication Skills, and Communications 201, Advanced Communication Skills. Although he devotes hours of each day to his new discipline, he finds its first premise is enunciated in the Communications 101 handbook preposterous. Human society has created language in order that we may communicate our thoughts, feelings, and intentions to each other. His own opinion, which he does not air, is that the origin of speech lie in song, and the origins of song in the need to fill out with sound the overlarge and rather empty human soul. In the course of career stretching back a quarter of a century, he has published 3 books, none of which has caused a stir or even a ripple. The first on opera, Boito and the Faust legend, the genesis of Mephistopheles. The second on vision of Eros, the vision of Richard of St. Victor, and the third on Wordsworth and history, Wordsworth and the burden of the past. In the past few years, he has been playing with the idea of work on Byron. At first he had thought it would be another book, another critical opus. But all his sallies at writing it have bogged down in tedium. The truth is, he is tired of criticism, tired of prose measured by the art. What he wants to write is music. Byron in Italy, a meditation on love between the sexes in the form of a chamber opera. Through his mind, while he faces his communications classes, flit phrases, tunes, fragments of song from the unwritten work, he has never been much of a teacher in his transcribed and, to his mind, emasculated institution of learning. He is more out of place than ever. But then so are other of his colleagues from the old days, burdened with upbringings inappropriate to the tasks they are set to perform. Clerks in a post-religious age. Because he has no respect for the material he teaches, he has no impression on his students. They look through him when he speaks, forget his name. Their indifference galls him more than he will admit. Nevertheless, he fulfills to the letter his obligations towards them, their parents and the state. Month after month, he sets, collects, reads, and annotates their assignments, correcting lapses in punctuation, spelling and usage, interrogating weaker arguments, appending to each paper a brief considered critic. He continues to teach because it provides him with a livelihood, also because it teaches him humility, brings it home to him who he is in the world. The irony does not escape him, that the one who comes to teach learns the keenest of lessons, while those who come to learn nothing. It is a feature of his profession on which he does not remark to Soraya. He doubts there is an irony to match it in hers. In the kitchen of the flat in Greenpoint, there are a kettle, plastic cups, a jar of instant coffee, a bowl with sachets of sugar. The refrigerator holds a supply of bottled water. In the bathroom, there is soap and a pile of towels. In the cupboard, clean bed linen. Soraya keeps her makeup in an overnight bag. A place of assignation, nothing more, functional, clean, well regulated. The first time Soraya received him, she wore vermilion lipstick and heavy eyeshadow. Not liking the stickiness of the makeup, he asked her to wipe it off. She obeyed and has never worn it since. A ready learner, compliant, pliant. He likes giving her presents. At New Year, he gave her an enameled bracelet. At Eid, a little malachite heron that caught his eye in a curio shop. He enjoys the pleasure which is quite unaffected. It surprises him that 90 minutes a week of a woman's company are enough to make him happy. Who used to think he needed a wife, a home, a marriage. He needs turn out to be quite light, after all, light and fleeting like those of a butterfly. No emotion, or none but the deepest, the most unguessed at. A ground bass of contentedness, like the hum of traffic that lulls the city dweller to sleep, or like the silence of the night to country folk. He thinks of Emma Bovary coming home, sated, glazen-eyed from an afternoon of reckless fucking. So this is bliss, says Emma, marveling at herself in the mirror. So this is the bliss the poets speak of. Well, if poor ghostly Emma were ever to find a way to Cape Town, he would bring her along one Thursday afternoon to show her what bliss can be, a moderate bliss, a moderate bliss. Then one Saturday morning, everything changes. He is in the city on business. He is working down St. George's Street when his eyes fall on a slim figure ahead of him in the crowd. It is Soraya unmistakably, flanked by 2 children, 2 boys. They are carrying parcels they have been shopping. He hesitates, then follows at a distance. They disappear into Captain Dorrego's fish inn. The boys have Soraya's lustrous hair and dark eyes. They can only be her sons. He works on, turns back, passes Captain Dorrego's a second time. The 3 are seated at a table in the window. For an instant through the glass, Soraya's eyes meet his. He has always been a man of the city, at home amid a flux of bodies, where arrows stalks and glances flash like arrows. But this glance between him and Soraya he regrets at once. At the rendezvous the next Thursday, neither mentions the incident. Nonetheless, the memory hangs uneasily over them. He has no wish to upset what must be, for Soraya, a precarious double life. He is all for double lives, triple lives, lives lived in compartments. Indeed, he feels, if anything, greater tenderness for her. Your secret is safe with me, he would like to say, but neither he nor she can put aside what has happened. The 2 little boys become presences between them, playing quiet as shadows in a corner of the room where the mother and the strange man couple. In Soraya's arms, he becomes fleetingly their father, foster father, stepfather, shadow father. Leaving her bed afterwards, he feels their eyes flicker over him covertly, curiously. His thoughts turn, despite himself, to the other father, the real one. Does he have any inkling of what his wife is up to, or has he elected the bliss of ignorance? He himself has no son. His childhood was spent in a family of women. As mother, aunts, sisters fell away, they were replaced in due course by mistresses, wives, a daughter. The company of women made of him a lover of women, and to an extent a womanizer. With his height, his good bones, his olive skin, his flowing hair, he could always count on a degree of magnetism. If he looked at a woman in a certain way with a certain intent, she would return his look. He could rely on that. That was how he lived for years, for decades. That was the backbone of his life. Then one day it all ended. Without warning, his powers fled. Glances that would once have responded to his slid over, passed through him. Overnight he became a ghost. If he wanted a woman, he had to learn to pursue her, often in one way or another to buy her. He existed in an anxious flurry of promiscuity. He had affairs with the wives of colleagues. He picked up tourists in the bar, on the waterfront, or at the Club Italia. He slept with whores. His introduction to Soraya took place in a dim little sitting room off the front office of discreet escorts, with Venetian blinds over the windows, pot plants at the corners, stale smoke hanging in the air. She was on their books under exotic. The photograph showed her with a red passion flower in her hair, and the faintest off lines at the corners of her eyes. The entry said, "Afternoons only." That was what decided him. The promise of shuttered rooms, cool shits, stolen hours. From the beginning it was satisfactory. Just what he wanted, a bull's eye. In a year he has not needed to go back to the agency. Then the accident in St. George's Street and the strangeness that followed. Though Soraya still keeps her appointments, he feels a growing coolness as she transforms herself into just another woman, and him into just another client. He has a shrewd idea of how prostitutes speak among themselves about the men who frequent them, the older men in particular. They tell stories, they laugh, but they shudder too, as one shudders at a cockroach in a wash basin in the middle of the night. Soon, daintily, maliciously, he will be shuddered over. It is a fate he cannot escape. On the fourth Thursday after the incident, as he is leaving the apartment, Soraya makes the announcement he has been steeling himself against. My mother is ill. I'm going to take a break to look after her. I won't be here next week. Will I see you the week after? I'm not sure. It depends on how she gets on. You had better phone first. I don't have a number. Phone the agency, they'll know. He waits a few days, then telephones the agency. Soraya? Soraya has left us, says the man. No, we cannot put you in touch with her. That would be against house rules. Would you like an introduction to another of our hostesses? Lots of exotics to choose from, Malaysian, Thai, Chinese, you name it. He spends an evening with another Soraya. Soraya has become, it seems, a popular nom de commerce in a hotel room in Long Street. This one is no more than 18, unpracticed, to his mind coarse. So what do you do? She says as she slips off her clothes. Export-import, he says. You don't say, she says. There is a new secretary in his department. He takes her to lunch at a restaurant a discreet distance from the campus and listens while over shrimp salad she complains about her son's school. Drug peddlers hang around the playing fields, she says, and the police do nothing. For the past 3 years, she and her husband have had their name on a list at the New Zealand consulate to immigrate. You people had it easier, I mean. Whatever the rights and wrongs of the situation, at least you knew where you were. You people, he says. What people? I mean your generation. Now, people just pick and choose which laws they want to obey. It's anarchy. How can you bring up children when there is anarchy all around? Her name is Dawn. The second time he takes her out, they stop at a house and have sex. It is a failure, bucking and clawing. She works herself into a froth of excitement that in the end only repels him. He lends her a comb, drives her back to the campus. After that he avoids her, taking care of skirt the office where she works. In return she gives him a hurt look, then snubs him. He ought to give up, retire from the game. At what age you want us? Did Origin castrate himself? Not the most graceful of solutions, but then aging is not a graceful business. A clearing of the decks at least, so that one can turn one's mind to the proper business of the old, preparing to die. Might one approach a doctor and ask for it? A simple enough operation, surely. They do it to animals every day, and animals survive well enough if one ignores a certain residues of sadness. Severing, tying off, with local anesthetic and a steady hang, and a modicum of phlegm. One might even do it oneself, out of a textbook. A man on a chair is snipping away at himself, an ugly sight, but no more ugly from a certain point of view than the same man exercising himself on the body of a woman. There is still Soraya. He ought to close the chapter. Instead, he pays a detective agency to track her down. Within days, he has her real name, her address, her telephone number. He telephones at 9 in the morning when the husband and children will be out. "Soraya," he says, "this is David. How are you? When can I see you again?" A long silence before she speaks. "I don't know who you are," she says. "You are harassing me in my own house. I demand you will never phone me here again, never." Demand? She means command. Her shrillness surprises him. There has been no intimation of it before. But then, what should a predator expect when he intrudes into the vixen's nest, into the home of her cubs? He puts down the telephone. A shadow of envy passes over him for the husband he has never seen.